All right, AP World History students, welcome to the Fiveable. We're in the official. We're behind the paywall. We are in the Cram sessions here.
This is the real deal. We've got little chili peppers to identify Cram.
Yeah, this is so it's Patrick here with Amanda.
You got John Green tonight. And, 2 AP legends. What's up, y'all? It's Amanda with Fiveable.
Mr. Lassiter, Patrick here, and we have some multiple choice stuff we're going to be looking at tonight. Some practice multiple choice. We'll be talking about strategies. We'll be talking about how we go about teaching this and some ways to attack these multiple choice questions. Some last minute reminders, the last week reminders, I guess. Amanda, what do you think? 1 week to go.
I'm so stoked. This is like my favorite time, review time. It's like, I feel like now is the time where students are like, oh yeah, I do actually know things. I remember stuff,
Yeah, this is an exciting time. I love this part of the year. I know the students may not, but
we're like put together, right?
Exactly. I want to remind all the students that there, of course, are opportunities for lots of questions tonight. So if you have a question, ask it in the question box, and
down below.
Right down there below, and we will get to as many as we can. If there's a question somebody asks that you particularly like, give it that upvote. That's how I choose them. You guys. So stimulus-based multiple choice question, start of the test. It's, I would say, what a lot of people stress over because a lot of it's just in the hands of whatever the College Board chooses. But it is a place where you can pass the exam with just the multiple choice. Though ideally the writing will be where you set yourself apart, those fives.
Yeah. And how many multiple choice questions do you need to get right to pass?
So that varies year to year, depending on the curve of the exam. I tell my students shooting for a 60% on them. I mean, if you're a good writer, you can get 50% of these things right and pass the exam.
Mm-hmm.
If you're going to get those points in the writing, and I know that I've had students in the past who felt weak on the multiple choice, but they were making 5s and 6s and 7s on all the essays. So if you feel like exactly, it's all combined. It's only 40% of the exam, which is down from where it used to be at 50%. So definitely more emphasis on writing these days.
Yeah, and so for some of you guys, it's basically like you need half of all the points available to earn a 3, right? Mm-hmm. So like where you earn those points can be a lot different. So if you have more on multiple choice, then you need less on essays to like earn a 3. And I think it's around like 70%-ish for like a 5.
Yeah.
Of all the points available. So it's not as bad as your grades at school, where like a 70% is not ideal. On the AP exam, a 70% is like near perfect.
Exactly. That's what I always remind my students. If you're performing at that level on these exams, you are compared to people across the country doing very well. I see some people throwing in here like what they did on mock exams, and hopefully those mock exams are mirroring what we'll see on the real one. And so you can use that as a guide, definitely. But no matter what, give it your full effort on the AP exam. You cannot take like the LEQ off at the end because you think you did well. You got to the whole way through power through, and then rest the night after.
Yeah, we rest on May 17th.
Exactly. So I'm going to go ahead and throw the slides up, Amanda.
Go for it. And you guys in the chat, while he's putting the slides up, give us a number like 1 through 5 of how you feel about multiple choice. So not about everything. Don't worry about LEQ and DBQ stuff tonight. Just on the multiple choice. How do you feel? How good do you feel with the multiple choice? All right. So you got 3s, 4s. Not bad.
All right, that's good.
Yeah, you guys are in a good spot. A couple 1s and 2s, a couple 5s. Very solid 5. Nice.
All right.
Well, don't worry, because now you're in a Fiveable cram session, and by the time we're done, hopefully you all feel like 4s and 5s in multiple choice. That's the goal.
All right. Yeah, that's ideal. Yeah. So see a couple 1s and 2s. Hopefully we'll get those up to 3s and 4s by the end of tonight. And of course, this is, all about the stimulus-based multiple choice, which is different from the old exam. I don't know if everybody cares so much about what the old exam looked like since they don't have to take it. But the old exam was a lot of like basic fact information that you just had to memorize and know and bring back up. And now you have these questions that are asking you to do the skills of the course and put those to use.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think it's so much better. Like you don't have to,
God, yes.
The test isn't just like a trivia game anymore, where you just have to remember little bits of information, like tiny little things about the Romans, about everyone. Now it's like, here's the stimulus, here's the document, and answer a question based on that. And sometimes it's kind of just, you had to know it. And sometimes you can figure it out based on the document. So we're going to show you some tricks to really figure those things out so that you can find the answers in the documents.
All right.
Give us a follow, y'all. Also, we just tweeted, we tweeted earlier this week an AP World Cram sheet that has everything you need to know about all of world history on one piece of paper.
That came at the perfect time. The other day in our live session, somebody asked about like a mega spice chart.
Nice.
And I did not have one to produce, but
there you go.
Fiveable coming through. I printed that out for my students today. So
nice.
Pull those out, guys, if you're in the chat.
It's on Twitter. It's on Instagram right now. So you can head over to our social media and check it out. And we have them for all the histories now. So
and some really great dates to remember on that too. Just to compartmentalize stuff or think about periodization.
So let's jump in.
All right. So we got stimulus-based multiple choice tips and practice tonight. There is a bit.ly here, which might be behind our heads, but it's bit.ly/SMBC review May 9. I'll put that in the chat right now since it's partially hidden. SMBC.
You can make it the call to action too, so the button will stay there.
Okay, let's do that. Call to action. Button label, URL. Here we go. Practice questions. All right, so this should URL should start with, I don't know.
HTTP. Yeah, so you guys can.
Hopefully that'll work.
You can follow along. Just click show.
Show.
There it is.
Aha. All right. Look at this. I'm learning like the kids. So that'll take everybody who's watching to some review questions. We're going to go over as many of these as we can get through tonight. And if we run out of time, we'll leave them with you and we can perhaps later on link the answers if need be, or I can stick it at the end of that document. A few of the reminders we were already talking about with stimulus-based multiple choice is the first part of the exam, everybody. So you start off with that, 55 questions in 55 minutes, 40% of your score. And for each stimulus, which it could be an image, a primary source, a secondary source, a combination of one or more sources. What else could it be? Graphs and charts, maps,
poems.
Yeah, poems. There was, A Push always likes to bring in some music, some kind of lyrics. A lot of the times I remember seeing on some old exams. But for A Push, definitely they love Taoist poetry. That shows up a lot, or lines from Hindu texts.
Yep.
I feel like they pop up a lot as well.
Yeah. Just to answer your guys' question in the chat really quick, primary source was written by someone who was there. Secondary source was written by someone who is studying it after the fact. Right. So secondary would be like from a historian. Primary would be anyone who was at the actual thing they're writing about or living during that time. Yeah.
So we're a lot of times those primary sources, you'll get questions like, what is the context to best understand this source? Secondary source that might be asking something more historiographical. Why might a historian have been writing about this event in this other time period? One that comes to mind to me is one of the practice questions that I was looking at was a Latin American historian writing in like the 1960s about imperial Spanish colonization in the 1500s, and it was because of anti-colonial, economic imperialist leanings. So, anyways, that might be getting too far into things to start off with. But are we ready to look at a source, Amanda?
Let's do it.
All right. So this first source is, so the first few questions we're going to look at is from period 2. Here I have a source that is from ancient Rome, Plutarch here. And if people are looking at this question, Amanda, when you get to a question, a stimulus-based question, what's the first thing that you tend to do? And I can talk about what I would.
Yeah. So like I basically answer multiple choice questions in like 3 steps. And I used to do like a full practice test with my students, and I was getting like in the 50s for doing this. So not just because I'm a history teacher, but this is my strategy. 1, I'm looking at the source. I want to know who wrote it, where are they, what's the year, right? Like tell me, in this one we have Plutarch, we have Greek-born Roman citizen. We know we're talking in the 1st century, or describing the 2nd century, writing in the 1st century CE. And I just want to get that into my head, so now I can start to think, okay, what was going on in this time, just to give myself some context. And then usually what I do is actually just read the first question. I don't even read the document yet. I go and read the first question, and I try to figure out, do I even need the document to answer this question? And if I do, what exactly am I looking for? And that makes it all much more of like a scavenger hunt, trying to find the answer rather than trying to read the document first and understand it. Because sometimes these documents can be kind of dense. So I give myself purpose.
Yeah, I agree. That's the number one thing, especially keeping in mind this test is timed, right? You got to keep a good pace. And if you have to read a document 2 or 3 times, well, that's cutting into your overall time. So by just understanding the source and knowing what you're reading for, hopefully you can only read this thing 1 time and answer all the questions that come from it. It saves time just hugely in the long run. And you're right. Sometimes you might be able to arrive at an answer with just a line or 2 from the source. And then maybe some of the later questions, not even look at the source.
Yeah, sometimes there's questions that like you don't even need the source. It's just really asking you about that time period, something that you need to know. And so it's definitely worth it to read the sourcing, know what time and place that we're even in right now, and then go and look at the first question and figure out, okay, what do I need to look for in this document? Do I even need to look at the document?
Exactly. So in this first SMBC or SBMC, whatever it is, we have Plutarch, Greek-born Roman citizen, describing a 2nd century BCE Roman political leader, Gaius Gracchus. But Plutarch is writing a few hundred years later in the 1st century, at least a couple hundred years later. And the first question that we come to here, I'm going to pull it up on the screen too. I don't know if it'll be too small for people to see both, but if you can't, then go to the document we shared with you. I got 33 or so people on it. The emphasis on road building in the document best supports which of the following conclusions? That would
tell me I need the document. It's asking me something specific about this document. So I want to figure out what do I need to look for? The emphasis on road building best supports which of the following. And then I might even read some of the answers to figure out what are my options.
Yeah. Is it Rome using state resources to promote trade and project military power over areas? Were they more concerned with art and beauty over function? Were the engineering, did they rely on borrowed techniques from neighboring civilization, or did they shape gender and family? Did patriarchy shape gender and family relations in imperial Rome? In my head, when I look at a question like this, and I think about road building in the post-classical era, I think about it as a way of building and maintaining empires. So even from the start, A is looking pretty good to me. And I'm just going to read the source to see what it has to say. So he was especially anxious about road building, paying attention to utility as well as to that which was beneficial to grace and beauty. So it's not just beauty, over functionality. He's concerned about both, which means B probably isn't my best answer here. And just right off the bat, even that first line saying paying attention to utility, that tells me there's something there that's important beyond just the beauty of it. Roads were carried straight without wavering. They were paved with quarry stone, made with solid masses of packed sand. They're definitely spending a lot of time talking about like the engineering here. Hollows are filled up. Bridges were built across whatever streams or ravines cut the roads. And both sides were equal and parallel in height. It does mention a lot of beauty and appearance, which really makes B attractive. But I think that first line of utility throws that out. He also measured the road mile by mile, set up columns, placed a stone so that people could mount horses without requiring anyone to help, basically. And, you know, you have to think about what roads are for, right? Which is trade and moving armies from one place to another. So when I get to this answer, I'm pretty closely looking at A.
Yeah. I pretty much, as the kids have said, like D, you're like, okay, but that's not really about roads. So you can sort of like kind of eliminate it. Exactly. And then you're trying to figure out, okay, maybe it's going to be C, like C could be possible, right? So then I'm just sort of looking at the document, just trying to figure out which does it best support. Does this document talk about other civilizations at all?
Yeah, that's the thing, right? So there are these, distractors that are trying to get you to see, all right, it's talking about the engineering of the road. Is it specifically saying that it is borrowed from other civilizations? Are they getting, are they building with Egyptian technology or Chinese technology? If they mention that, then I would gravitate toward that answer. Yeah.
You guys are so funny. They all think this question is super easy. I feel like this question is not like that easy. I mean, it is. Maybe it's an easier one. Maybe it's going to get harder, but I feel like you guys then are really well off. Like you are prepared for this exam. If you're looking at this and you're thinking this is cake,
Yeah.
You're in a good spot. So just know that these are AP level questions. These are not, I don't think these are super easy. And so you're in a really good spot. So there's a lot of like validation happening right now for you. If you're looking at this and you're thinking, oh, I know that answer, then you're in a good spot. Yeah, we'll get you with the next one.
Yeah. So just like to be clear, A is the best answer here. I'll bold it on the document we're sharing as we go. Our best answers. I will be honest, Amanda. I wrote this question, and it's a lot harder going back to it today than when I wrote it.
Yeah.
Because this is actually the first question I wrote for this activity that we were thinking about doing this week. And B and C are attractive, but A, right? We're thinking about the purpose of roads, the utility of roads, and the fact that these are being built with state resources that the emperor himself is kind of, or not the emperor, excuse me, this political leader is, overlooking this process and making sure it goes smoothly. So we will not walk everybody through. We'll let people get their answers in with the next one, I think, first before we move on. So let's look at question number 2. The motives behind the development described in the passage that are most similar to the motives of which of the following later developments from 600 to 1450 CE?
Okay, so already, like, you don't necessarily need the document again. You have the answer from the last question, and now I'm looking specifically for who's in this next time period, 600 to 1450.
Exactly.
So what can I eliminate right off the bat? I can eliminate A, that would be later. Spain and Portugal.
Yeah, Spain and Portugal after 1450. I think we get rid of that because it doesn't fit in the time period they're looking for here.
Right. What else? Can we eliminate anything else? Not right off the bat. So
no, right off the bat. Everything else seems like something that would be in time period 3 there.
Okay. So how do we know? How do we figure out the right answer now?
Well, let's see. A lot of people putting the answers in the chat. I'm seeing a So if you haven't put your answer in the chat, go ahead and do it. Share it. No need to be worried about getting it right or wrong. Put your best guess. From here, looking at this question, I have to then think about, well, again, what are the motives behind road building? It is trade. It is projecting power. It is consolidating an empire. And terracing techniques, while important for food production, they're not going to do those things, right?
Right.
So I would eliminate B out of there, even though it's something that would fit in this time period. It doesn't fit with the motives behind this development. And then you have C and D, right? Construction of a Grand Canal and competition over Silk Road trade. But the question is about the motives behind road building, right? Wanting to connect empires, trade. Competition over Silk Road could play into it. But the kind of one thing that really stands out in period 3 to me is how the Sui and then later the Tang Dynasty used the Grand Canal not only to connect northern and southern China for trade purposes, but also to extend Tang control over southern China. And that is very similar to how Rome used roads to connect far-flung parts of its empire, for example, in Gaul or all the way into the east of Greece and what is it, Thrace or something that's over there, So I'm there down between C and D. And for me, looking at this, I think, all right, it is some measure of infrastructure in order to connect your empire to trade. D, the motivations behind competition of the Silk Road might be somewhat different, or it might be much more so economic than controlling the core part of your empire.
Yeah. Which
leads us to C as the right answer.
Yeah, y'all nailed it. Good job on that one.
Yeah, did well. I just messed something up. All right. Putting that in the chat or in the other screen. Sorry, guys. I'm working on like four windows right now. All right. Question 3. Which of the following civilizations united their empire using similar techniques to those described by Plutarch? And this is pretty straightforward.
In other words, who else had roads?
Exactly.
Who else used roads?
All right, guys, put it in the chat. I'm pretty sure we've covered this in a Fiveable review, so hopefully y'all were there. And people are nailing this one too.
Yeah.
And I see some questions popping up here, so let's just go through French Indochina, which eventually becomes Vietnam. Not especially known for road building, so we throw that out.
Kind of swampy.
Ghana Empire, same thing. Throw it out. The Zulu, which some people are asking about that. That's the kingdom of southern Africa that wars with Britain. Again, not known for their road building, but it's the Inca who built incredible networks of trade. And then they used, of course, those roads to unite their empire together and rule over large parts of the Andes region. Those roads were not necessarily didn't look the same as the Roman roads. They were full of, even like steps up the side of mountains and suspension bridges and were a remarkable engineering feat of the Inca Empire.
Totes.
All right, are we ready to move on? So that's the 3 questions for this source. That's about all you can get out of this source.
Easy. And notice, y'all, like we only actually read the first 3 sentences, really.
Exactly.
Don't get tripped up on the sources and go back and forth and reading it a million times. Figure out what you need to know in the document and move on.
Definitely. So let's head on to our second set of questions. This is the kind of our second document here. I'm going to do the same thing, Amanda. I attack questions just like you, and we can maybe go through this one a little bit faster. Let students put it in, and then just talk real quick about what the answers are.
Totally.
I look here. I have a source. It's the Quran itself. So these are verses from the Quran. Composed in the very earliest years of Islam. And I'm going to go back. I'm going to look at the questions. I'm going to see what I need to know. I'm going to go and read it. This one you may think, well, this is short. I can read it and then go look at the questions. But for me, just like I think what you were saying, I want to know what I'm reading for. I don't want to just read it because it's short, because then I'm just going to end up going back and reading it again. So question 4, the attitude toward trade expressed in the passage is best used as evidence of which of the following? So that means I'm going to have to read it. I'm going to have to know what the attitude toward trade is. Yeah.
But now it's like, but now I got purpose. Now I can go back in the document. I'm looking specifically, how does he feel about trade? So I'm really like, I'm not even like digging deep into it, right? I'm kind of skimming and looking for like words that have something to do with trade.
Exactly. So with this source, O ye believers, devour not each other's property. Basically, it starts with warnings against cheating in trade, which might make you think that there is a dislike for trade, which kind of goes against what I know about Islam. So I'm going to keep reading. And it goes on to say, give full measure when you measure out weight and true balance. This is fair and better in the end. If the two parties speak the truth and make it manifest, their transaction shall be blessed, right? By God, I imagine. And if they conceal and tell a lie, the blessing shall be obliterated. On the day of judgment, the honest, truthful Muslim merchant will take rank with the martyrs of the faith, which is I think, a pretty strong statement in support of good, honest trade, right? In support of trade. So everybody go ahead and put in the chat what you think if you haven't already done so.
Yeah, and also, like if you know how like Muslims feel about trade, you actually didn't really need to read this, right? Because this is the holy book, and so this is gonna just state what Muslims feel about trade. And so if you already knew that because you learned it in class, you read about it, then you're looking for the one that supports that.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's that's definitely a good point. Like some people are going to come to this question and they're going to know what the Quran says about trade. But that's also the beauty of the stimulus-based multiple choice test now, right? If you don't know that, you can use the source to figure it out.
Exactly.
So, so if we go through this, the correct answer here, a lot of people got this right in the chat. It is D. Commercial transactions were an important aspect of early Islamic life in the Arabian Peninsula, right? The emphasis, the fact that they would even talk about trade at this detail in the holiest book, in the holy book of Islam,
right,
is evidence of that, and
is unique. Now, so for those of you that didn't know this, like always connect like Muslim. Like think about Muslims. There are a lot of merchants that are Muslims, right? So like Muhammad himself is a merchant. The like spread of trade in this time period is so much because of Muslim traders. And so if you didn't know it, now you know.
Yeah, exactly. And I will say this, there are a lot of, don't be thrown off. And maybe I'm going a little too slow. We probably need to speed up for these kids. They might need us to go faster, but don't be thrown off by like these big words, commercial transactions, right? That just means trade, right? Trade was an important aspect of early Islamic life. So they're going to throw a lot of stuff at you to make you, what the test has to be a certain amount of words long or something. They have all sorts of stats on these things.
Yeah. Cool. So you guys are right. It's D.
All right. Let's take a look at question 5. Question 5. Which of the following most directly contributed to the attitude expressed in this passage? So what's contributing to the positive attitude toward trade?
So why were they? Let's see. I'm looking through. Islam developed along the trade routes of the Arabian Peninsula. Islamic society tended to be isolated from the surrounding communities. That wouldn't make sense. The influence of older monotheistic traditions on the religion of Islam. European influences on commerce. Yeah, you guys are killing it here.
Yeah, they're doing great. They nailed it. With A, C is a tempting answer to me. It's I think the one you think, that's something I know about Islam, right? It was influenced by older monotheistic traditions,
right?
But is there any evidence of that here? And if you think about Christianity and trade, it wasn't as positive to trade reactions, right? They wouldn't allow even things like early Christianity didn't allow people to charge interest on loans, right? Which is why Jewish communities become so important in Europe.
Yeah. And for those of you asking why not D, because it's out of place, right? So we're not talking about the Mediterranean basin. Of course, there are European influences on commerce in the Mediterranean basin, but that has nothing to do with these early Islamic communities.
Exactly. And this is, if we're thinking about the immediate contributions too, the Western Roman Empire has fallen apart. So we're not going to see, you wouldn't see even as perhaps maybe as many of those on Islamic trade. The Islamic world of the Middle East has more of an influence on Europe, I think, than the other way around.
Totally.
Yeah, and as one of the students says here, D is supported by the passage, given the time period.
Oh yeah, the passage.
Right. Yeah, you gotta remember that. So that's a good way. Like if you're down between two answers and they both seem true, which happens a lot, which is best supported, which is which fits with what the reading says.
So for the question of like why is it A, the other reason is just around like it's developing around Islam itself is developing on trade routes where trade is such an important part of life in that region that like Muhammad is a merchant. Other early Islamic, converts are merchants. And so it's going to be embedded into the way of life.
Mm-hmm. And Islam has not spread very far out of the Arabian Peninsula by 650.
Right.
All right. It'll be the Umayyads who do that. So 6, in addition to the activities described above, which of the following contributed most to the expansion of Islam throughout Afro-Eurasia from 700 to 1500 CE? Ooh, that's a big period of time. You got to break this down.
Why did Islam spread?
Yeah, in Afro-Eurasia.
Besides trade, why did Islam spread is basically the question. Again, I don't need to look at the document here.
Yeah, I'm thinking, really there's two things that I think about, which is like conquest, right? Which can be one thing, right? Spreading an empire and then people converting because it's expedient or because they see this empire growing and it's a sign from God that it's the true religion. Or beyond that, with traders, a lot of times we see missionaries spreading religion. And so some of these answers maybe lend to that, but we have to look and see, are they 100% true? So a lot of people are kind of wavering on this one, I think, a little bit. So I'll take a little bit to go through it. The first answer, forced conversions to Europeans to Islam as a result of the Crusades. And we have to think, well, what is going to contribute most to the expansion of Islam across these 800 years? Well, the Crusades start in about the year 1100. 1095 is the call to crusade. It's not until 1187 that the Muslims have significant victories and take back Jerusalem, and the Crusades are over by roughly 1300, right? So that, and beyond that, we don't see Islam as much as Christianity on their end forcing conversion of people once they're conquered. They basically just expel them from the cities. So, A is not something we're going to see being the primary reason Islam spreads, especially across this entire time period. When we get to B, the activities of missionaries and Sufis in the Indian Ocean basin, this is where we're going to see that, this is one of the things that comes to mind with the spread of religion, including Islam. And Sufism, for everybody who needs to remember, that is the more mystical aspect of Islam. It was much more concerned with the kind of mystical presence and trying to achieve closeness to God rather than practicing dogmatic aspects of Islam. And just like Buddhism or Mahayana Buddhism, Sufism allows Islam to kind of mold itself to the societies that it moves to, whether it's to sub-Saharan Africa or East Africa or to South and Southeast Asia. Wherever Sufism goes, it is able to adapt Islam to local cultures and thus allow it to spread throughout this time period. C, I didn't see many people putting C because it talks about the Pax Mongolica, which doesn't come around until the 1200s. And then D, the Umayyad Caliphate's victory at the Battle of Tours. Well, they don't win the Battle of Tours. Actually, that's why Islam is stopped and does not continue to basically conquer Europe. One of the great what ifs of history. What would have happened if the Umayyads had won that battle over the Franks? So the best answer here is B.
Boom.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think the way to get this one right is almost thinking like, because the question says, in addition to the activities described above. So I'm looking for like other reasons than trade.
Exactly.
Right. So like, okay, so C is about trade. So
got to throw that out.
Throw that one out. And then A, so then it becomes just like, do you know what's the like correct piece of it? You're going to get a lot of questions like this that you just kind of have to know the history. Like that it's a history test, Yeah. We're getting a lot of questions right now of like, how do I remember the history?
Yeah, but that's a great thing. Like, ask questions down below. We get to the end of this, we can answer some of those. I don't mind sticking around a little bit longer to answer some of those tonight. But so B is our best answer here. I don't know how people feel about that. Maybe they should just put like the emoji that makes them feel of how they feel about that question. Hopefully it won't make two of them too angry. Maybe we'll see some positive stuff. Should we look at another type of question?
Let's do it.
All right. I'm sure people are sick of reading. So here we have in questions, whatever we're at, 7 through 9, we have 2 images, right? Image 1 here on the left. These are pack trains of llamas laden with silver from the mines of Peru. I mean, in this case, what do you do when you get to a picture, right? It's not a reading, so you can't skip over it completely, but at the same time, you don't want to spend the whole time dissecting it. What do you do when you get to these types of images?
I was like trying to pick my emoji. I still look at I look at the source. Like the source is always the first place I go to, no matter what kind of document it is, right? So even though on this, I'm not going to have to read words, I need to know the sourcing. So I know I'm talking about the silver trade here on the left. I'm looking at a picture of like a Costa on the right. I might even just recognize that image, but it says this is a Spanish man, his mestizo wife, and their child. So I'm looking at, mixed race, South American family. And then I'm just kind of like glancing over the picture really quick. I can do that because, unlike a text document, I don't have to like slow down too much. And so I can kind of glance over it. I'm clearly seeing trade on the left. There's, some llamas. I'm seeing a family on the right. And now I want to know what the question is, right? Like,
yeah, exactly.
It's like how in, 5-10 seconds of looking at the document, how much information can you just like pull? It's sort of like the first thing to do.
Yeah, exactly. Like when I look at this first one, it's llamas with silver, these natives. I'm thinking, Meta system, Potosi,
right. You're just like
Spanish
there in the words.
And these questions break down, right? It's not wanting to, the first question 7 here, you don't even have to look at both of them. Image 1 is best understood in the context of which of the following from 1450 to 1750. So throw your answers in the chat here. And yeah, so I'm trying to understand, what matches what I know based on what we just did, right? Because what we were doing there and looking at the pictures is trying to develop a context in our head for what we're looking at.
Exactly.
So we have the development of a global currency used for trade, which fits with what I know, right?
Yeah.
Spanish silver coins, the pesos de ocho. All right, so go on, the spread of domesticated beasts of burden from Europe to the Americas, which is a tempting answer, right? It's a true thing that happens. But then I look more closely at the picture, and the beasts of burden shown here are llamas. And they're one of the 2 types of beasts of burden that are native to the Americas. And so that's not what is being shown in this image specifically.
Right. That's a thing that happened in this time period, but llamas are from the Americas. So I don't know that one.
Exactly. So then I go to the growth of the Atlantic slave trade. But here looking at this image anyways, there's no evidence of the Atlantic slave trade here. Actually looking back at this question, I think maybe I should have included a thing about Amerindians with these llamas to make it a little bit more clear. But we aren't seeing African slaves in this image, or at least that's not pointed out as being in this image. And then lastly, the declining power of China relative to Europe. But two things I know. Well, one thing I know in this time period is that China was not necessarily declining yet relative to Europe. It's going to be like vacuuming up silver in this time period.
Yeah.
And beyond that, nothing about this image really makes me think China and Europe. So I throw that one out.
Right. Yeah. Just keep in mind, y'all, like, even if you know that something is true, like, stick to the document that they're giving you, like, they're literally asking you, like, which of the following best describes what's going on in this picture, not just like what's going on in the world. So in the picture, I see silver. So I immediately go to A because I see currency. People are rolling in the dough then in silver.
Yeah, I am. I've always been looking for like a formula for answers in these AP questions. When I look at these released exams, and it doesn't always fit a formula, but there's always a right answer, right? There's often a distractor that is outside the time period. There's often a distractor that's true, but just doesn't fit the source. And then there's often just a fake news one, right? Like one that's just completely out of nowhere that you can throw out. So that's often, not all the time.
Yeah.
Heck, I even took a practice exam with my students last year, and I missed a couple, misread a question, and then one was just really hard. You know, I've been teaching the course for 5 years, so it happens, guys. Don't get down on yourself. But the correct answer there is A for everybody. Let's take a look at the next question. It's shifting our attention, right? We have to shift our attention to the other image. The interactions of the Spanish America depicted in image 2 differed from those of British America in which of the following ways? Now, I think this one's pretty tough. I want to see what students have to say about this, because it is relying on you knowing a little bit of something about colonial societies and how Spanish colonial societies differed from British colonial societies. It's also expecting you to do what you did, Amanda, when we first looked at this and thought about, all right, I know this is probably South America, mixed race, wife and child, caste system, right? That hierarchy. So as we go through the options on this question, we got to keep that in mind and think about also, what do I know about Britain? And when I'm doing my reading about colonial societies, one of the things that always stands out is that there is kind of this really elaborate racial social hierarchy in Spanish America, but in British America, we do not see those same interactions between the white British settlers in colonies like Jamestown and in the Plymouth colonies of Massachusetts. And we see very actually little interaction between the white British and non-whites. And one of these answers kind of lends to that, actually. So looking through them, A, the British colonies attracted more families, so men were less likely to marry women of other ethnicities. So I'm going to keep that. That stays around. We do not see as much intermarriage in the British colonies, perhaps because it attracted more families. So even if I'm not sure yet, I'm going to keep reading. British colonies sought religious freedom, so they were less likely to convert natives to Christianity. But while they do seek religious freedom, that second part, less likely to convert natives to Christianity, doesn't really follow from the first part to me. It seems kind of just like a distractor that wants to pose as the answer to the question. And and the British would have been likely to want to convert whoever they wanted to come across.
Mm-hmm.
C, the main occupation of British colonists were agricultural, so they were less likely to be wealthy. And in this image, the man himself looks like he's fairly well off, but that does not necessarily mean that was the purpose of this image, nor did that necessarily mean the British were less well off. And then D, British colonists were banned from interacting with natives, so they did not have the opportunity to have kids. Well, there was no such ban, particularly from government on that type of interaction. Although likely carrying out wars against them would have been discouraged, but there was no specific ban in that way. So the only answer that fits with the history that I know and seems to fit with the theme of the image here is A.
Totally. It's kind of funny. I never even thought of that reasoning as to why those racial policies existed in North America, but I think this is in one of my videos on YouTube, but it's just the difference in racial policies around North America and South America are just fascinating to me in terms of how you have basically integration versus segregation, right? In South America, it's whiten the society. In North America, it's keep them divided. Right.
Yeah, and it's interested in how it has changed the development of countries going forward, right?
Totally.
The British colonies, one thing that they discovered early on was that their colonies were struggling. A lot of people were not happy in the colonies because they were leaving their families behind, and so very quickly the British encouraged those migrations of families over. But for a long time the Spanish had this conquest mentality, right? So they were sending soldiers over who were fighting wars, and it was all about adventure and defeating the Aztecs, defeating the Inca, and conquering this land. And so they were much more likely to interact. And this might not be the time for this discussion, but I wonder how much of that is also because Spain, the culture of Spain was much more diverse itself than perhaps the culture of Britain, which was, pretty monolithic, I guess, as opposed to Spain dealing with, interacting with Africans, interacting with Muslims and Jews and Spaniards and all those different cultures.
Totally.
All right. Let's take a look. Next one. Now this is interesting. Taken together, the interactions depicted in both images most reflect which of the following developments from 1450 to 1750. The systematic genocide of Amerindians in Spanish America. The genocide of Amerindians across the Americas was not necessarily systematic until perhaps maybe the 1800s in the U.S. B, the creation of new racial classifications and hierarchies in the Americas. C, the spread of European disease during the Columbian Exchange. Or D, the revolutions of Latin America. The revolutions of Latin America, D, that's going to be too late. That's after 1750. So toss that out. A, because of that term systematic, and the image 2 doesn't really lend itself to any specific harsh treatment of Amerindians. So I'd throw that out.
In fact, it's kind of the opposite. She looks pretty happy.
Exactly.
I don't know if she is happy, but she's
I hope she is.
Dressed in nice clothes. She looks well, I don't know. Who knows?
So we're left with B and C. The spread of diseases, though, doesn't seem to be something that would be in both. It's not the feature of both images. So that's not this child's not sick or anything. These natives aren't shown as being sick, although maybe malnourished. But the creation of new racial classifications and hierarchies would fit, right? This idea of this perhaps Creole man, his mestizo wife and their child in this casta system. And then in the other image, you have the white Spaniards overseeing these practically enslaved natives who are mining silver. And so that also implies hierarchy as well, which leads to B being the answer.
Ding, ding, ding.
All right. I'm going to bold some of these answers. Some people had some questions, I think, on what the correct answers were on some past ones before we move on.
Totally. I also want to take a few minutes to just give you guys some just like multiple choice tips that I have that are
that'd be great.
I've got there's one tip that I always gave my students. All right, so like listen closely on this one. And this is only if you happen to run out of time, you've gone through all the multiple choice questions, you've got like 30 seconds left, and you're like, shoot, I have a couple questions left, whatever. Hopefully you get through all of them, but if you have a couple questions left and you're running out of time, the thing that you should do is choose one letter. Let's say B or C. It doesn't matter. Like there's no actual like math to say that C is always right. Doesn't matter what letter you pick, just pick that letter and answer the rest of them that letter. The reason why you want to do that is because a couple of reasons. What I see is that students sometimes when they go to guess in those very last few seconds, they go like random, and your likelihood of, if you choose random like that, your likelihood of getting them right is low. But if you choose all B in the last one or all C, chances of one of those being B or C is good. And in an AP test, you're not losing points, so it's worth it to not leave anything blank. So if you can pick up one more point because of that last ditch effort, worth it. But again, only if you really don't have time to read the questions. Like your best bet is reading the questions and answering them because you can see how you can totally like figure it out. In terms of like which letter is best to guess with, it literally doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what letter because it's totally random throughout the essay, throughout the test. So just pick one, and that's the one that you'll do. But only if you have 30 seconds left.
Yeah, that's one of the most important tips ever. I think you can't leave anything blank on this test at all. You got to fill it in, and game theory is exactly that you just choose the same one all the way through. I will say a tip that I'd like to share right here before we take a look at the next source is, a lot of people, if you're struggling on time, right? And I know a lot of us do because there's a lot to read on this test. And there's just a lot going on in our heads. Over this last week, if time is your big concern, you're not so much concerned about the content of the course, you're not concerned about the writing, then I encourage people, don't do like a big 55 question practice test. That's not going to improve your time. What'll improve your time is taking one of those practice tests from whatever review book you use, 10 at a time. I'm going to do 10 questions, and I'm going to do 12 questions. I'm going to do 15 questions, and time yourself in smaller increments. And if you can start getting a good pace across those shorter time periods, on the longer test, you'll find yourself doing much better in time as well. Mm-hmm. But it's much easier to correct yourself in smaller chunks as you go through questions. 10 minutes one day, 15 minutes the next, 15 minutes the next, 12 minutes the next, whatever it is. That can really help speed things along.
Yeah, that's really good. The other tips that I just wrote out like in our little article today about multiple choice. The other big tip is like, when you go through the test, answer on the Scantron as you go. Don't skip it and come back later. Go through all of it and answer all of it in the correct spot, and put a little star on the question if you want to go back later and double check, but don't skip it because you can totally mess up your entire test if you forget that you skipped it and then you answer all of them in the wrong spot.
Yeah, please do that, guys. Please make sure you're answering as you go because, one question off can really mess you up. And I've seen people, at least in my classroom tests, I've never had a student report this to me on the real test, where they'll circle all their answers and they'll run out of time before they get it bubbled in. They might miss 10 questions because of that.
That's even the worst part, right? Like if you're just like circling on the test and then you're like, I'll answer on the test and then I'll go back and bubble. Like, don't do that.
Yeah, you can't afford to do that because when they call time, you have to put your pencil down or you might get that score invalidated.
I circle a page, then bubble a page. So I wouldn't even do that. I would look at the question, figure out what you want to answer, and bubble it right away. Mm-hmm. Like question, bubble. And if you want to go back and look at it later, then put a little note, put a little star next to it or something and go back and look at it. Don't Don't second guess yourself, but just make sure you don't mess it up,
Yeah, the only time I would ever say to skip is if you were so conflicted about putting an answer down in that second that you're going to waste time and just
pick one.
Then just pick one, bubble lightly, and then go back, and it'll make it easier to erase. That's a great tip. That's something I almost forgot to say today, but yeah, nothing blank. Bubble as you go. All right, let's take a look at our next set of questions here. We have two maps here, although these could probably actually be separate questions because none of the questions asked to look at both at the same time. So let's just look at the first map here and the question that goes along with it. In this map, we have the slave trade depicted, and it says the developments depicted in map 1 are most directly the result of which of the following in the 16th through 19th centuries. So let everybody put your answers in here, and then we will reveal.
And okay, so what am I asking myself first? It says the developments depicted in map 1. Okay, so automatically I know that I need to look at map 1 and figure out what is the development. What is it showing me, right? So I'm seeing migration of Africans in the map. And now I can go back and look at the question and try to figure out, okay, what is then, why did that happen?
Yeah, very much so. And especially this idea, thinking about it. And in this question, it doesn't give me years. It just says 16th through 19th century, 1500s through 1800s. Keep that in mind, everybody. Always convert that to some years in your head. That might help you with periodization on these questions. And it's asking which of these developments are the direct result of which of the following. So we're looking for the cause of this. And most people are nailing this. So I think they know this topic pretty well, Amanda. B, the dependence on coerced labor to support colonial economies. It's that plantation labor, especially production of sugar above all, that drives the growth of slavery in the Americas.
Totally. Easy.
Well, they made it look easy. It probably wouldn't have been easy at the start of the year when they started this process.
That's true. I know. Y'all are a week out, so you're pros at this point.
Yeah. And, that talks about coerced labor. D talks about the demand for slaves, but then we have to think about why was there a demand for slaves? It certainly wasn't for military purposes in the Americas. All right. So question 11, which of the following describes a continuity from 600 to 1700 CE depicted in map 1? Which is an interesting question because, the slave trade is not a continuity starting back across the Atlantic anyways. The Atlantic slave trade is not a continuity beginning at 600. So we have to look at where else are Africans migrating in this.
All right. So trying to figure out in this time period, are there years on this map? I can't see.
Let me see. Let me look at the other map.
Let's see. We've got export of slaves into the Middle East and the Indian Ocean.
There are some dates on it, but they are tough to see. It says has the slave trade. It says 1500 to 1900, but there and a few other dates in some regions, but it doesn't have a date for all the movements. Some trans-Saharan trade it shows from 1700 to 1900, but the other dates are not listed.
Importance, the growth of the triangle slave trade in the Atlantic, importance of indentured servitude in both the Americas and Afro-Eurasia, and the use of African slavery by European imperial powers. How do I know which one it is?
Yeah, so the key here is looking at the time period and thinking of it as a continuity. So B, the growth of the triangle slave trade does not start until after 1490. So that can be thrown out because that's not going to be a continuity within the time period. It's not covering 600 to 1700. Mm-hmm. The importance of indentured servitude in the Americas and Afro-Eurasia. Again, indentured servitude does not start until late 1500s in the Americas. So that can be thrown out. And the use of African slavery by European imperial powers. We don't even see the European imperial powers starting until the 1500s. So all of those answers really reflect changes and not so much continuities, whereas the export of slaves into the Middle East and Indian Ocean had been happening for a long time, beginning as early as maybe not quite as early as 600, although there probably was some movement at that time, but especially as we get into the 700s through 1700. The slave trade from Africa to the Middle East, especially from the regions south of Egypt, Sudan, East Africa, into the Indian Ocean. That is a continuity in this time period, although that slave trade is vastly eclipsed by what comes along in the Atlantic.
Totally. I mean, you can see the little like arrows, but just remember that like slavery is a continuity throughout history. It doesn't just start when the transatlantic slave trade starts. It's just the difference is who and where.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And how many, because the slave trade into the Middle East, into India, or into the Indian Ocean, was far fewer in number than what will be used in the plantation economies of the Americas. But yeah, certainly a continuity. That is an important thing. So let's take a look at question 12. And this is shifting our attention to map 2. And I think these maps are grouped together mainly because we have one looking at slavery, one looking at indentured servitude, although 2 different time periods. So all the following developments in the 19th century contributed to the migrations depicted in map 2, except the dreaded except question. These will get you if you don't read every word of the question. So go ahead and put what you think it is in the chart, keeping in mind that 3 of these contributed to migrations depicted here, and 1 of them did not. All right, seeing some A, C, and D from a lot of students. Making sure that we're not lagging too much and students getting time to read. Good question here in the chat. What's the difference between slaves and indentured servants? So slaves are taken against their will to typically work, to do work. In the case of the Americas, it was generational slavery. Indentured servitude, while it is oftentimes mentioned as a coerced form of labor, meaning it was not totally free will, the idea was that those workers would sign a contract and work for a period of time, and the end of that contract would be granted their freedom. So that was, and oftentimes, there's another question coming through: were indentured servants paid? Yeah, oftentimes very little, but they might be compensated in some way on the back end with maybe a grant of land, perhaps, or with their voyage over is their payment as well to wherever they're going. And then they also could, depending on their field, gain a skill. Mm-hmm. However, indentured servants were treated notoriously poorly. And eventually, if we think about indentured servitude in the 1600s, it became so difficult to get people to sign up for being an indentured servant that that system falls away and it just collapses in favor of the use of slaves.
And like wage labor.
Yeah.
I have to be honest. I looked this one up. I was like, which one is it? So you guys were kind of all over the place, and I totally get it because this was a tricky one. You had to really pay attention to what's being said in the answers here. Yeah.
So, the following. So I'll walk through the thought process on this one. All the following developments of the 19th century, so in the 1800s, contributed to these migrations. Right. These are the migrations being shown here are overseas indentured servants from 1834 to 1919. And for the most part, we see some coming from Japan, a great deal coming from China and India, right? In this late 1800s, early 1900s. So what could contribute to that? The abolition of slavery in parts of the Western Hemisphere. Well, slavery starts to come to an end in the 19th century in the Americas. In the US, in Haiti, it's 1804. In the United States, it's 1865. In eventually, Brazil is the last to grant to end slavery in 1880 something. So as slavery ends, there still is a demand for labor, especially in plantation agriculture, and that labor is going to be sourced through the rise again of indentured servitude, especially because Europeans have developed more imperial connections with these territories, and well, we'll see some other reasons here in just a second. New modes of transportation promoting movement around the world. In the 19th century, you have steamships, which make it easier for people to migrate around the world. Some students might remember key concept 5.4 is all about labor migration. And one of the things that enables migration is the improvement of transportation. Anti-imperialist sentiment in China and India leading to outward migration. Now, this one is, it's really worded real fancy, but anti-imperialism, while certainly there was that in China and India, that would not necessarily lead to people leaving those countries. You would see in India instead people fighting to push out the British, or China, people fighting to push out the British and the French, or any other people who had spheres of influence. But that wouldn't necessarily explain why people are migrating from one place to another. Mm-hmm. And then increased global demand for raw materials in an industrial era, that would necessitate people harvesting those. For example, all of these lines going to like the Pacific, right? A lot of those, they're just mining guano in the Pacific. Mm-hmm. So, there's an increased demand for that in this time period. So the only one that really doesn't fit with what might be driving migration and labor in this time period, well, at least non-slave labor, would be C.
Yeah, y'all were all over the place, and I totally get it because I was 2 when I first read it. And so the thing to remember is that half of C is correct, that there is an outward migration from China and India, but the reason as to why they're leaving is wrong. Right?
Exactly. If you change C to outward migration from China and India because of greater connections to European industrialism or European imperialism, then it becomes a correct answer. But it's not simply anti-imperialist.
Yeah, you got to be careful. So, why did they leave China and India? They left because it was easier to leave with transportation, mm-hmm. and because there were opportunities abroad. Yeah.
I was listening to a podcast the other day about, I've been really on this guano islands kick, and why Chinese migrants even go to do this. And, times were tough in China in this time. They face, after the Taiping Rebellion, there is mass starvation. That's one of the reasons why the Taiping Rebellion is able to come about. But so many people get killed. People want to go elsewhere, find opportunities, and they find those through indentured servitude. All right, question 13, and then we can get to the chart, which hopefully won't take too long. What developments depicted in map 2, or the developments depicted in map 2 most directly led to the following? So the last question was a cause, what caused this map? And here is what is the effect, right? So it's cause and effect questions, kind of bookending this. That's something you see a lot with sources in stimulus-based multiple choice questions. You have some kind of context question, what caused this, what was the effect, and then maybe some tangentially related question. So let's see what people have to say on this one. This is tough. I think what we're finding, the answers are a little bit all over the place. Early returns anyways here. I think we're finding is, maybe an area where we can spend a little bit more time, maybe go over that in one of our next Cram sessions, thinking about what did the return of indentured servitude look like in the late 19th century. And that has been up, in questions on a test. I think it was part of a labor migrations question a few years back.
They have a whole DBQ about indentured servants.
Yeah, years ago. I think
that was the hardest one before they changed the test.
Yeah,
it won't be that hard anymore. DBQs are way more straightforward now.
Yeah, I mean, this is a tough topic because it's so hard to wrap your head around the fact that Wow, indentured servitude makes a comeback. All right, so let's look at this. People had some time. The spread of South Asian culture to the Caribbean. So thinking about perhaps the development of ethnic enclaves in the Caribbean, South Asian culture going to places like Trinidad, for example. So that is a true statement. B, ethnic conflict between South and East Asian migrants in South America. And this is one of those that really does, I guess, what we're seeing is this is more content based. Like, what do you know? What content do you know in this course for this one? So B isn't a typical thing that we see. We're not going to be seeing conflicts breaking out between South and East Asians in South America and any wars or anything. So we can throw that out. Rapid industrialization of urban centers in the Caribbean. Again, most of these indentured migrants or indentured servants are migrating to work predominantly in agriculture. So we're not going to see them moving necessarily to urban centers, as you may have seen, for example, Europeans moving to urban centers in the United States during this time period. And D, Chinese imperial expansion in the Pacific. They're not expanding into the Pacific in this time period. They won't. Japan eventually will, but the Chinese will not. Which means the only answer here that really fits with what we know is A. Okay.
Yeah, and actually, I think this question is easier if you really think about cause and effect. Like, forget about, if you don't actually have to really know this content. You just need to know, like, the question is asking, if people are moving around, what would be an effect of that?
Exactly.
And what I'm noticing is that as I'm rereading this, is that the wrong answers are all like causes of either like push or pull, like in terms of like, we kind of go through this, you think if there's ethnic conflict happening, people wouldn't move there.
Exactly.
Rapid industrialization would be a cause, right? Because of more industrialization, there may be more jobs, but also in the Caribbean, there's just more of like agricultural work anyways. So there's some like historical inaccuracy there. And then Chinese imperial expansion, same. Like, it wouldn't necessarily be like an effect of this migration.
Yeah, it would be a cause. If you swap out Japan there,
right,
it would still be a cause.
So, yeah, that's what I would say is like, just look for, if the question's asking for an effect, look for things that are effects.
And A is just a restatement of one of the key concepts from key concept 5.4, which talks about, that key concept is very well structured into cause and effect. And the effects of this migration include things like, especially the development of ethnic enclaves and the movement of cultures to new places. That's like one of the big effects. And then, of course, the reaction to that, right? The Chinese Exclusion Acts and the White Australia policies. So that's a couple of the big things that we see. And then effects on the homeland where people are leaving, right? Where women are taking greater roles because most of these migrants are men. So I'd encourage people, if you're really struggling on this, on time period 5.4 and migration, take a look back at those key concepts, especially on the videos we have on migration in the library there, and that hopefully will help. All right, let's look at the last type of source here. And we had some maps here. We've had some images, had some readings. This is a graph and chart. And I heard you say the other day, or it was in something you sent out, that this can be a time suck, right, Amanda? Like, graphs and charts really can eat up your time.
Yeah.
But if you do it the right way, it shouldn't, right? Look at the source information. Here we have world distribution of deaths from malaria, earliest 20th century, all the way to 2010. You have malaria-related annual deaths in the millions. And then I want to know what the questions are, because I want to know what I'm looking at in this chart. I'm not going to try to figure out anything until I know what I'm reading.
Yeah, I actually kind of just try to figure the chart out first and just like, what's the trend? What's the pattern? Usually you can kind of figure out, like, obviously there's a big dip here. And so I'm just like, okay, so the rest of the world, people stopped dying from malaria, but in Africa, more people were dying.
Exactly.
And that's all I need to know,
Yeah, and the numbers here, this isn't a math exam. They're not likely going to be like, how many million people died in Africa in this year, right?
Yeah, who cares?
A lot of times I try to ignore those as best I can unless I have to look at them. So yeah, what do we read in this chart for? Which of the following is the most likely explanation for the overall decrease in malaria deaths since 1920? So kind of taking it into the whole thing into account, 1920, we had over 3 million deaths a year. Now we have just under 1 million deaths a year, right? What is the reason for that?
Yeah, you guys are killing it on this one.
Yeah, this one they seem to know pretty well.
This one's straightforward. Well, yeah, because you're looking like, okay, well, less people are dying, so what would prevent deaths? And now I'm kind of looking through, the risk of all these diseases declined as a result of migration trends. That wouldn't necessarily lead to less disease.
Yeah, you actually see more migration, so you would expect disease to spread, like in the influenza epidemics.
Increased production of genetically modified agricultural products. That's not going to explain the rest of the world. Rise of global mean temperatures. Not really talking about disease. Availability of medication. That would prevent disease.
Exactly. And that's, it's a big point of the key concepts in Unit 6 is that, you could swap out anything here. It could be, decline in smallpox, decline in polio, decline in measles, mumps, whatever it is. The answer is going to be the same every time, right?
Yeah. And
medicine helped increase human survival.
Shout out to all you guys for getting that so fast and feeling this is easy, because again, this is not an easy concept or thing to just know. You know this because you've been studying this. You're in a good spot.
All right, let's go. Last question for the night. Which of the following is the most likely explanation for the disparity in malaria deaths between African nations and those of the rest of the world from 1970 to the present? So we're not even looking at this whole chart anymore, are we? Mm-hmm. We're just looking at 1970 on and trying to come up with the explanation for why, in this case, as you can see, once you start looking at 1970, most of the worldwide deaths from malaria are occurring in Africa as opposed to the rest of the world.
My brain is broken. Me too, y'all.
There's a lot of questions. We're going in depth. I will be honest. I was trying to write questions that I thought would be difficult for us tonight and cause thinking. So, I would say, not every question on the test is going to be a hard hitting question.
But it's good. You don't want all the questions on the test to be too hard.
So, we got a lot of folks, I think most people are hitting on the correct answer here though, which is B. So the first answer, option A, medical technology to treat malaria is not available in Africa. That's simply not a true statement. Medical technology is found in Africa. There are efforts like getting mosquito nets out there to prevent malaria. Although perhaps maybe not at the high level that needs to be. So B, so we throw A out. Africa is not that isolated from the rest of the world, folks. B, high rates of poverty in Africa and low funding have allowed malaria to persist. And that is our correct answer. It actually is just a rewording of the key concepts that talks about that in some regions of the world, diseases associated with poverty, such as malaria and cholera, persist in areas with high poverty because they don't have the means to fight it. They don't have necessarily clean water. They don't have the education, or they don't have access to the medicine as easily as perhaps areas like the United States, which has eradicated malaria. C, native Africans do not have the same natural immunities to malaria as other regions of the world, such as Europe. So this was trying to make the connection like disease spreading to the Americas, that perhaps that was the same thing happening in Africa. That's simply just a false statement. That's not the case. And D, the rise of malaria deaths in Africa coincided with changes in lifestyle following decolonization, which is a tempting issue because there are some diseases associated with changes in lifestyle, like people living longer lives and, coming down, developing Alzheimer's in old age or heart disease as people live longer. But that would not be the case here. Malaria is not a disease of lifestyle. it's a disease based on that is passed on by mosquitoes. It is very much dependent on where you live and whether or not you have adequate medication to avoid or to counteract the parasite that causes malaria. So I don't know, maybe I think about that more because my wife is a former Peace Corps volunteer and biology teacher.
Yeah.
But B is the best answer here. Malaria is one of the examples from the key concepts of diseases that are associated with poverty in the world. So just a few of those reminders I'm throwing up here, and then we can spend. I know we're dang at an hour and 20 here. Maybe I should have cut one of the sources at the beginning, but yeah, I don't know what you want to do. Some questions here, Amanda, or I don't mind taking them if you want to jump out, or what would you like to do?
Yeah, I'll probably head out. I gotta get ready so tomorrow night, y'all, we're gonna be doing actually no, short answer is Saturday. Oh man, we're trying to keep track of our calendar out here. So tomorrow I'm gonna be doing short answer questions for world. No, I'm sorry, one more time. Saturday I'm gonna be doing short answer questions for world. But one of the things I did realize is that we don't have a world session tomorrow. So let me ask the chat here, is there some topic that you would like? We already have scheduled sessions for SAQ, LEQ, DBQ. I'm also going to do a 2-hour session on Monday to just cover all of world history.
Nice.
Like big patterns, big picture. Like, what are possible questions that you could see in every single time period? What are the big causes, big effects of things? So I can do an extra session tomorrow night on something. Looks like you guys are asking for periods 3 or 4. We could definitely do just sort of a period 3-4 jamboree.
Yeah, that might be good. When we did I guess it was last week, I did the period 3 and 4. We mostly just focused on trade, so there certainly is a lot more that could be in there. I'm sure that would be.
All right, so I'll probably add a session tomorrow on like period 3 or 4, and then we're basically live every night until the exam. So for all of you guys, most of the sessions between now and the exam are plus members like you guys, and so you can spread the word to your friends if this was helpful for you. And yeah, we're just like cruising through. We're just trying to like bump up your scores and stuff, So before I head out, I want to know your answers to this question. How do you feel about the multiple choice questions now that you've like been talking about them for an hour and 20 minutes on a nice Thursday night? Give me like a 1 through 5 AP level. Where are you at? Let's see.
All right, over 9,000. Okay.
4, 2.
I'm hoping these numbers are higher than what everybody put earlier.
I think they definitely are. I'm seeing a lot of 4s and 5s. Just be confident, hit the sourcing first, just like we did. Like we really talked through it, like look at the sourcing, figure out where it is and when it is, then read the question, and then look back at the source and just look for the information you need. And you can totally handle this. What time tomorrow? I don't know yet. We'll blast out an email for it.
Anusha, it says you missed half the stream. Your Wi-Fi went out. Remember, you have access to these. You can always go back into Fiveable.
Yeah, you can rewatch this. This replay will be up soon. We're trying to upload as fast as we can. There's so much going on, and so much. Oh man, I'm so excited for you guys for what Fiveable will look like next year over the summer. We're doing Camp Fiveable. If you can even like get ready for this. So just, I'll hop out so you guys can talk about more of this stuff. But yeah, look forward to Camp Fiveable. Right. We're living in camp life. Thanks, Jillian. Shout out to you too for coming through all these streams. What is Camp Fiveable? Only the best summer ever. So we'll like be announcing that later, but hang tight. Camp Fiveable is coming. All right, I'm out.
All right. Hey, thanks so much, Amanda. And I'll stick around a little bit for anybody who wants to stay in the chat. I'm going to answer some of the top questions here. And then, we'll spend 15, 20 minutes on that before we head out tonight.
Yeah, you can answer the question about my curly hair. I'll leave you with that one.
Yeah. I'll let you save that one for your
my DMs. All right, y'all. See you later. Good night.
Night. All right, guys. Obviously, if you're not so interested in these questions, feel free. You can bow out now. I'm going to go through as quickly as possible some of these questions. I'm going to start with Kieran's question. How do you think the best way to improve on stimulus-based multiple choice other than practice is? Well, beyond practice, I would say with your questions is approaching the question as Amanda said earlier, right? You want to look at that information and don't wait to look at the answer choices to get your brain moving. Really start the process of getting your brain going the moment you look at that source, the moment you look at that date, before you read it, before you read the question. I like to kind of get the wheels spinning, right? If those wheels are spinning in your head before you get it, then you're going to be much faster at processing. So keep practicing that. Keep brainstorming, right? Brainstorming activities I really love. There's some resources maybe I'll share with Amanda. She can share out with you that I have that help with that process of brainstorming that I can share. And I may put it in this a little bit later if I can find it. The other thing I would say is, once you've answered stimulus-based multiple choice questions, especially if you're using some sort of practice book, is you really need to spend time making sure you understand why the correct answer is correct. That's why tonight we went so long, right? I really wanted to make sure that you understood why the right answer was right and why the wrong answer was wrong, rather than simply just saying, oh, I got it right, or oh, I got it wrong. So a good practice book, a good review book will have explanations for those questions, and really spending time with those explanations will pay off in the end. That's why I say, don't do 40 questions a night, do 10, and then spend that time with those explanations. And if you can do that, you're going to improve on those stimulus-based multiple choice questions. You may not realize quite how much, but it will pay off on the test. So good question. I don't know. So Amanda, DM Amanda on that question about her product. I use Suave for Men, something like that, Ocean Breeze, and that's how I get this thing going up here. All right. Do the multiple choice questions go in chronological order or coordinate with time periods as you work through the test? This is a really good question. And the multiple choice, historically, back in the old test, it would go chronologically for the old test was 70 questions. So it would go chronologically for about 35 or 40 questions, and then it would reset and go chronologically again. Now with the stimulus-based multiple choice questions, it generally goes chronologically. Although they may not all go chronologically, meaning that if you get like we had tonight, a stimulus from one time period, it might have a question that might ask about a later time period with a similar trend, or an earlier time period with a similar trend. So not every question will go in time order, but for the most part, what I've seen on released exams and practice exams, the sources will be relatively chronological. That you might have one or two aberrations, or you might have one from 1840 followed by one from 1750, but you'll generally have time periods 1 and 2 together, then 3, 4, 5, 6. That's what I've seen so far. All right. Can you review the difference between Federalists and Anti-Federalists, and also the Whigs? Oh man, I wish I could, but that's definitely an A-push question. I don't think I can answer that for you. I'm sorry. I wish Amanda was still here. She could, but I don't teach AP or AP US history. Otherwise, man, I wish I could be all over that. Question 4, I have the ultimate study guide. I have studied somewhat throughout the whole year. So what should I do with the time I have left? Really need to make a 4 for colleges. Well, of course, hopefully we can get you to a 5 here even. So I would say at the end here, just do some practice, right? You've studied information. Is it vocabulary? Maybe take a practice test and grade yourself. And when you take that practice test and grade yourself, you might be able to look and see, where are you missing questions? Is it in units 1 and 2? Is it in unit 3, 4, 5, or 6? And that can help you really hone in on what specific topics you need to study. If you see, you might want to see if you can identify any trends. Beyond that, knowing the key concepts really helps. I have a lot of videos on my YouTube channel. Go like, subscribe for Fiveable, like, subscribe for my YouTube channel at RTHS_Patrick Lassiter. I got a lot of stuff with key concepts and some packets to go along with that if you're looking for a new or perhaps a different way of studying. It is a little bit more passive rather than active studying, though, so I have to say that. So I struggle between two answers and always seem to choose the wrong one. Any way to improve? Well, what I would say with if you're down between two answers, see what makes sense. Maybe reread the question. Is it looking for cause and effects? Is it looking for change or continuity? Is your answer within the right time period? And then above all, go with your gut. I tell you what, research shows that throughout your life, when you change an answer, you are more likely to change it from a right answer to a wrong answer than the other way around, from a wrong to a right. There is such thing as gut instinct. As a teacher, I spend a lot of my time trying to convince my students that their initial gut instinct is usually right. Not all the time, but more than 50% of the time it is. So, go with your gut instinct. Choose which one you feel in your heart is most likely the correct answer, and trust yourself, because you put in a year of studying this, and so you got to understand that you're putting in that time. You're likely to be on the right track with a lot of these. And if you're second guessing yourself, I see some people in here in the comments saying, I second guess myself. You got to trust yourself. You're putting in time. Heck, you're in this review session on a Thursday night at 10:30 p.m. right now, or watching this later. You're doing the right stuff, and that's paying off. It really will. So just understand, you're becoming an expert in AP World History in this survey course, and thus you can trust your brain to make these decisions. And whatever happens after that happens. But for the most of the time, you're going to be on the right side. All right. Somebody was asking Amanda to go over the process for multiple choice again. She put it in there. I just want to reiterate, certainly read the source first. Read the sourcing of the source. So like the information about the source, not necessarily the whole reading. Think about context. Think about when and where it was created. And then read the first question and decide if you need to read the doc, and then how much or what you're reading for, and then do that and answer the question. That's key. Again, by looking at that sourcing information, it'll get your wheels turning in your head. Looking at the question, it'll let you know what you're reading for. And then you can go look for that thing and answer the question. It'll save you time in the end. Is there a timeline of all of the events? For world history, I don't think so. But what I will say is Fiveable today, out on all their social media platforms, shared a really great spice chart, which breaks social, political, cultural interactions, economics down into time periods, which is really good. And they also had at the very bottom, like dates you should know, and that was on point. I really liked those. I thought those were some pretty solid dates. Some other places to go. Jonathan Henderson has a History Haven site, and I know he's got some stuff on there. One of the AP teachers who runs AP Worldopedia. It has some timelines on there that you can go through as well. But I would say, you're looking for a way to study. Make that timeline, right? Put together your own timeline. That's a really active way of studying. Do you struggle in trying to figure out when different Chinese dynasties are? Sit down and make a timeline just for China and put those major events on. And then you might struggle for stuff that's happening in Russia. Just start a new page. Make a timeline just for Russia, right? That I think can be very helpful. All right. Let's see what else we have here. Are there practice quizzes available? There are some public practice quizzes that the College Board has released. However, there are some practice questions and quizzes that are not available for the public. So just be careful about those, because if you are responsible for any of those getting out, then they will, try to shut down your social media or whatever it is. That's something we don't use on here because it's not allowed. The College Board is those are under lock and key, so to speak. But there are some public documents out there. If you go look up the College Board course descriptions, that'll have some practice questions in them. Beyond that, review books. There's a great, Barron's has good review books. Princeton Review. There's some. There are a few other ones. You can go your local bookstore. You can go to Amazon, get it on Prime. It'd be here in time for the test. And those come with practice questions. Some people who are in the chat, if you use a specific book that you like, you may want to comment on their question and let them know. All right, so none of the other questions have upvotes. They're all at 0 votes. So I think we can probably, let me see, not specifically related to multiple choice. It's important to know the order of Chinese empire names and their periods. So there's a great, if you want to get, I know this is out there, but if you want to learn the Chinese dynasties in order, you need to look up the Chinese dynasty song on YouTube. Okay, it's to the tune of like Frere Jacques or something like that. And it's Shang Zhou Qin Han Sui Tang Song, Yuan Ming Qing, and then Mao Zedong, or the Republic of China, then Mao Zedong. And of course, then Deng Xiaoping comes to power in communist China. But that song, I tell you what, I am a teacher of AP World History, and that song I still sing to myself when trying to get the order of these Chinese dynasties. So, man, go to it. Look it up on YouTube, Chinese dynasty song. It's very crude, like video of just like some really bad animation, but it'll help you remember it. Difference between 3 branches of Islam: Shia, Sunni, and Sufis. Well, there really are just 2 major branches of Islam. There are actually several branches within those, Sunni and Shia. And their differences are stretch back to the early years of Islam and an argument over succession to the Prophet Muhammad. And they split then in just basically the line of succession to who is the true successor of Muhammad. That was the difference. But over time, they started to develop greater differences in leadership and practice, especially later on when the Ottoman Empire comes along. So in like the 1600s, they battle with the Safavid Empire of Iran, and that leads to greater differences. Sufism is kind of a side branch of Islam that focuses on the mystical aspects of the religion rather than the rules and dogmatic aspects of it. And it is more malleable. And so it allows Islam to spread to places like India, etc. And I believe most Sufis, well, I'm not going to say that. I think they mostly identify as Sunni, but I can't be sure of that. So I'll walk back that statement a little bit. Are Mongols always the answer in period 3? No, they are not always the answer. I think they only appeared in these practice questions once tonight, and it was not the actual answer. What is the best way to answer an SAQ effectively to get all the points? Well, you will need to join the SAQ practice on Saturday with Amanda. She will be addressing that question, thinking about the difference between identify and explain and how to address those questions. So come on Saturday, do that. I could start now, but we'd be here another hour. Is there any better technique to improving LEQ or DBQ timing than just writing fully in a timed environment? That's going to be, I think, the best practice. A lot of time is lost at the beginning of those questions with brainstorming and developing your thesis. So maybe practicing that a little bit with some samples. There are a lot of examples of LEQs and DBQs on the College Board website. You can go and find them there, also in your review books. But I think just practicing them in that timed environment is the best way to do that, Snehal. All right, so that's all the questions for tonight. I got to go downstairs, catch up on iZombie because I missed the episode tonight. But I will be back with you. I think I'm back with you on the 14th. On Tuesday, we'll do some LEQ practice. I think that's what we're slated for on that night. I'm headed up to Boston this weekend. I'm going to see the Red Sox. You guys get some studying done. Feel free to ask Amanda your questions over the next couple of days. Join us on Monday for the Freemanpedia question of fives, I think is what we're calling it. The biggest event in AP history studying for the year. Yeah, that's it. I hope y'all have a good night. Peace out. See you later. Adios. Have a great day. Get some sleep.